The final rays of sunset painted the dusty main street of Willowbrook, Texas, with hues of amber and gold as Temperance Foster stepped off the westbound train, her heart as heavy as the trunk she dragged behind her. The year was 1878, and for the second time in her 22 years of life, she found herself abandoned at the altar, this time in a town where she knew not a soul. Temperance adjusted her bonnet, squinting at the unfamiliar surroundings. This wasn't how her life was supposed to unfold. The letter from Harold had been clear he'd found another, someone more suitable to frontier life. Just like Thomas before him, who had decided a banker's daughter would provide better financial prospects than a schoolteacher with nothing to her name but books and dreams. The station was nearly empty now, passengers having been greeted by loved ones or moving on to accommodations. Temperance stood alone, the weight of her situation settling upon her shoulders like the dust that coated her once fine traveling dress. "Madam, you waiting on someone?" The station master approached, keys jangling at his hip, clearly eager to lock up for the evening. Temperance faltered. "No, I suppose I'm not." The older man's expression softened. "Town's got a boarding house 3 blocks north. Mrs. Peterson runs a decent place. Might have a room for the night." Temperance nodded her thanks, gathering her resolve along with her trunk. The wheels caught in the dirt as she made her way down the wooden platform and onto the main street. Each step stirred up a small cloud of dust that settled on the hem of her dress, already stained from the long journey. The boarding house loomed ahead, a 2-story structure with a wrap-around porch. As Temperance approached, a commotion erupted from the saloon across the street. 3 men stumbled out, their raucous laughter cutting through the evening quiet. One noticed her and nudged his companions. "Well, looky here, boys, fresh off the train and all alone." Temperance quickened her pace, but her trunk caught on a rut, jerking her backward. "Need some help there, pretty lady?" The men crossed the street, their intentions clear in their unsteady gait and leering smiles. "No, thank you, I'm perfectly fine." Temperance pulled harder on her trunk, heart hammering against her ribs. "Don't look fine to me." "Looks like you could use a strong man." The tallest of the 3 reached for her arm. "The lady said she's fine." The deep voice came from behind her, steady and commanding. Temperance turned to see a tall figure silhouetted against the setting sun. He stepped forward, revealing a weathered face beneath the brim of a well-worn Stetson. Dust coated his denim pants and cotton shirt, but the revolver at his hip gleamed with care. "This ain't your business, Dallas," one of the men grumbled. "I'm making it my business, Turner." The man Dallas moved to stand beside Temperance. "Now, why don't you and your friends head back to your whiskey before you do something stupid?" Turner sized up Dallas, clearly weighing his chances. After a moment, he spat in the dirt. "Come on, boys, ain't worth the trouble." They retreated, casting dark glances over their shoulders. "Thank you," Temperance said, studying her rescuer. He stood over 6 feet tall, with broad shoulders and a lean frame hardened by physical labor. His face was tanned and lined, speaking of years under the sun, but his eyes were a surprising shade of blue clear and direct. "Where you headed, miss?" he asked, his voice deep but not unkind. "The boarding house, I believe." "Mrs. Peterson's," Dallas nodded. "Mind if I walk with you?" Those boys might circle back once the whiskey gives them courage. Temperance hesitated, but the alternative seemed far worse. "I would appreciate that, Mr. Dallas." A brief smile crossed his face. "Just Dallas, Dallas Reed." He picked up her trunk with ease, surprising her with the gesture. "And you are Temperance Foster. You have business in Willowbrook, Miss Foster." She swallowed hard. "I was to be married." Dallas's eyebrows rose slightly. "Was. My former fiancé apparently found someone more suitable." The words tasted bitter in her mouth. Dallas said nothing as they walked, but his stride slowed to match hers. When they reached the boarding house, he carried her trunk up the steps and waited as she rang the bell. Mrs. Peterson, a plump woman with graying hair, opened the door, her eyes widening at the sight of Dallas. "Evening, Mrs. Peterson," he said, touching the brim of his hat. "This is Miss Foster. She needs a room." Mrs. Peterson assessed Temperance with a critical eye. "Just arrived." "Yes, madam." Alone, Temperance lifted her chin. "Yes." Mrs. Peterson pursed her lips but stepped aside. "I have 1 room left. $2 a week, meals included. No gentlemen callers, no noise after 9, and church on Sundays. Thank you. Temperance reached for her purse, suddenly conscious of Dallas standing behind her. I'll leave you here, Miss Foster, he said, setting down her trunk. Mrs. Peterson will take good care of you. Thank you, Mr. Reed. I am in your debt. He touched his hat again. No debt, madam, just neighborly. With that, he turned and descended the steps, his figure soon swallowed by the gathering darkness. Mrs. Peterson ushered Temperance inside, chattering about house rules and breakfast times. But Temperance's mind was still on the tall cowboy with the steady blue eyes who had come to her rescue on her first night in a town that was supposed to have seen her become a wife. The room was small but clean, with a narrow bed, a chest of drawers, and a washstand. A single window overlooked the main street, now quiet as night settled over Willowbrook. Temperance unpacked her few belongings, her wedding dress remaining folded at the bottom of her trunk. She couldn't bear to look at it, not yet. As she prepared for bed, Temperance wondered what tomorrow would bring. Her teaching certificate was valid in Texas, but would a small frontier town like Willowbrook have need of another schoolteacher? More pressing, how would she face the curious stares and whispered gossip once word spread of her situation? She'd come west with such hope, such certainty that this time would be different, that Harold was different. Now she was alone, hundreds of miles from her family in Boston, with nothing but $20 to her name and a twice-broken heart. Temperance blew out the lamp and climbed into bed, too tired to cry, too numb to plan. Morning would come, and with it decisions. For now, she would sleep, and try to forget the look of pity in Dallas Reed's blue eyes when she'd said she was to be married. Dawn broke over Willowbrook with the sound of roosters crowing and wagons rumbling down the main street. Temperance rose early, washing her face in the cold water from the pitcher, and donning her simplest day dress, a practical blue cotton with a white collar. At breakfast, she met the other boarders. Two elderly sisters who had moved west after the war, a young clerk who worked at the general store, and a quiet man who kept his nose buried in a newspaper. Mrs. Peterson served a hearty meal of flapjacks, eggs, and strong coffee. You planning to stay in Willowbrook long, Miss Foster? Mrs. Peterson asked as she refilled coffee cups. Temperance hesitated. I'm uncertain. I had planned to make my home here, but circumstances have changed. Mrs. Peterson's expression suggested she had already heard the gossip. Well, if you're looking for work, the mercantile might be hiring, or the dressmaker you're stitching looks fine. She nodded at Temperance's collar where she had mended a small tear. I'm a certified teacher, actually. Is there a school in town? There is, but they've got Miss Whitfield. Been teaching the children for 15 years now. Mrs. Peterson paused. Though I did hear she's planning to marry her sweetheart from San Antonio and move there come winter. Hope flickered in Temperance's chest. Perhaps I should inquire then. After breakfast, Temperance made her way to the small schoolhouse at the edge of town. Miss Whitfield, a thin woman with spectacles and a no-nonsense demeanor, confirmed she would be leaving her post in December. The school board will be looking for a replacement, she said, adjusting her glasses. I can put in a good word for you if you'd like. We don't get many trained teachers out this way. I would be most grateful, Temperance replied, relief washing over her. As she left the schoolhouse, she spotted Dallas Reed across the street, loading supplies into a wagon. He caught her eye and nodded in acknowledgement. Temperance felt a curious flutter in her stomach as she returned the gesture. Over the next few days, Temperance explored Willowbrook, a town smaller than she had expected but with all the necessities: a general store, a bank, a small doctor's office, 2 saloons, and a church that doubled as a meeting hall. She sent a letter to her parents explaining her change in circumstances and assuring them she was safe, though she omitted the part about being abandoned at the altar. Again. A week into her stay, while browsing the shelves at the mercantile, Temperance overheard a conversation that made her blood run cold. Heard Dallas Reed found her wandering the street her first night here, a woman whispered to her companion. Poor thing came all the way from Boston to marry Harold Wilkins, and he up and married Sally Johnson instead. Just sent her a letter saying not to come, but she was already on the train. Well, what did she expect? Harold needs a woman who can work a farm, not some city girl with soft hands and fancy ideas. It's not the first time either. My cousin in Boston wrote me that she was engaged before to some banker's son who jilted her just the same. Temperance's cheeks burned with humiliation. She abandoned her shopping basket and fled the store, nearly colliding with a solid figure on the boardwalk outside. "Whoa there," Dallas Reed steadied her with gentle hands. "You all right, Miss Foster?" Yes, thank you." She couldn't meet his eyes, mortified at the thought that he too knew of her shameful history. "You don't look all right." His voice was low, concerned. "Something happened in there." Temperance swallowed the lump in her throat. "It seems my situation has become common knowledge." Dallas's expression darkened. "People talk too much in small towns. It's the truth, though, isn't it? I've been jilted, twice." The words felt like stones in her mouth. Dallas looked at her for a long moment. "Some men don't recognize value when they see it." He cleared his throat. "I'm headed to my ranch now, but I'll be in town Saturday for supplies, if you need anything." He trailed off, seeming suddenly uncertain. "Thank you, Mr. Reed. You've been very kind." He tipped his hat and moved past her into the store. Temperance continued down the street, her earlier humiliation now mingled with confusion. Dallas Reed was not at all what she had expected from a frontier cowboy. There was a gentleness to him that belied his rough exterior, a thoughtfulness in his words. Saturday arrived with clear skies and a bustling market day in the town square. Temperance, having received confirmation from the school board that she would be considered for the teaching position come December, felt a renewed sense of purpose. She might have lost a fiancé, but she hadn't lost herself. At the market, she purchased a few necessities: thread, a new handkerchief, and some ribbon to freshen her bonnet. As she was examining a display of apples, a familiar voice spoke beside her. "Miss Foster." She turned to find Dallas Reed, his hat in his hands. He looked different today. His shirt was clean, his hair freshly trimmed. "Mr. Reed, how good to see you again. I wondered if you might do me the honor of joining me for lunch at the hotel restaurant." He spoke formally, as if he had rehearsed the words. "They serve a decent meal on Saturdays." Temperance hesitated, aware of the curious glances from nearby market goers. Dining with a man would surely set tongues wagging again. But there was something in Dallas's eyes, an earnestness, a respect that made her nod. "I would be pleased to, Mr. Reed." Relief softened his features. "Good, that's good." The hotel restaurant was the finest establishment in Willowbrook, with white tablecloths and actual silverware. Dallas pulled out her chair and ordered for both of them roast beef, potatoes, and apple pie. "I hear you might be our new school teacher," he said once the waiter had departed. "News travels fast. Small town." He smiled briefly. "You'll be good at it, I can tell." "Oh. And how can you tell that, Mr. Reed?" "You've got patient eyes, observant. Kids need that." He fiddled with his fork. "And you're educated. Not many women come west with proper schooling. You're very perceptive. Comes from living alone. You watch more when you talk less." He paused as their food arrived. "My ranch is about 5 miles outside town. Nothing fancy, but it's growing. Started with just 10 acres and 100 head of cattle. Now I've got 50 acres and 300 head. That's impressive. It's a living." He cut into his roast beef. "Keeps me busy." Too busy, sometimes. They ate in companionable silence for a few minutes before Temperance gathered her courage to ask, "Why did you invite me to lunch, Mr. Reed?" Dallas set down his fork and met her gaze directly. "Because you looked like you could use a friend. And because I've been wanting to talk to you proper since the night you arrived." "Is that all?" His eyes crinkled slightly at the corners. "For now, Miss Foster, I believe in taking things slow." Something warm unfurled in Temperance's chest, not the giddy excitement she had felt with Thomas or Harold, but something steadier, more grounded. "I think that's wise, Mr. Reed." "Dallas," he corrected gently. "If we're to be friends, you might as well use my given name." "Dallas," she repeated, the name feeling right on her tongue. "And you must call me Temperance." "Temperance," he said, as if testing the sound of it. "It suits you." Their lunch extended into the afternoon as they discovered shared interests: books, though Dallas admitted he had little time for reading; music, though neither played an instrument; and a love of open spaces, though Temperance's experience was limited to the parks of Boston. By the time Dallas escorted her back to the boarding house, Temperance felt lighter than she had in months. He didn't try to hold her hand or steal a kiss, as Thomas and Harold had done on their first meetings. Instead, he simply touched his hat and said, "I'd like to see you again, Temperance." "Perhaps next Saturday." "I would like that very much, Dallas." As she watched him stride away, Temperance realized she hadn't thought of Harold once during their entire lunch. Perhaps Willowbrook held more promise than she had initially believed. The weeks passed in a steady rhythm as summer gave way to early fall. Temperance secured the teaching position to begin in January after Miss Whitfield's departure. In the meantime, she found work helping Mrs. Peterson with the boarding house cleaning rooms, preparing meals, and managing the accounts. Every Saturday, Dallas came to town, and every Saturday they spent the afternoon together. Sometimes they dined at the hotel. Other times they walked along the creek that ran behind the town, talking of everything and nothing. Dallas told her of his journey west from Tennessee after the war, of building his ranch from nothing, of his dreams to expand his herd and perhaps add horses to his stock. Temperance shared stories of her childhood in Boston, her training as a teacher, and eventually the painful tale of her 2 failed engagements. "Thomas courted me for a year," she explained as they sat on a fallen log by the creek. "He was so charming, so attentive, he made me feel special. But when his father's bank faced financial difficulties, he suddenly discovered that the daughter of a prominent businessman would make a more advantageous match." Dallas's jaw tightened. "And Harold was different, or so I thought. We met through correspondence. My cousin in Denver knew him, thought we would suit. We exchanged letters for 6 months before he proposed. He sent money for my train ticket." She trailed off, the hurt still fresh, and then he found Sally Johnson. Dallas's voice was gentle. "Yes. Apparently she knows how to milk cows and preserve vegetables, skills I sorely lack." She attempted a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. "Those are just skills, Temperance. They can be learned. Character can't." She looked at him then, struck by the sincerity in his face. "You're a good man, Dallas Reed." He dropped his gaze, a flush creeping up his neck. "I try to be." As October painted the surrounding countryside in golds and reds, Temperance found herself thinking of Dallas at odd moments while folding laundry, while reading in the evening, while lying awake at night. His steady presence in her life had become a comfort, a foundation in a town where she still sometimes felt like an outsider. She was no longer the jilted bride in town gossip. Now she was that Eastern gal Dallas Reed is sweet on. The change should have annoyed her, but instead it filled her with a quiet pride. Dallas was respected in Willowbrook, hardworking, honest, and fair in his dealings. That he chose to spend his precious free time with her said something, though neither had put a name to what was growing between them. One crisp Saturday in late October, Dallas arrived at the boarding house with a different proposal. "I thought you might like to see the ranch," he said, his hat in his hands as always when he spoke to her. "If you're willing, that is, Mrs. Peterson could come as chaperone." Mrs. Peterson, who had been sweeping the porch nearby, snorted. "I've got a boarding house to run, Dallas Reed, but Temperance is a grown woman and you're a gentleman. I trust you'll behave accordingly." Dallas's ears reddened. "Yes, madam." And so, Temperance found herself in Dallas's wagon, heading out of town on the dusty road that led to his ranch. The countryside opened before them, rolling hills dotted with oak and mesquite trees, the grass golden in the autumn sun. "It's beautiful," Temperance breathed, taking in the vast Texas sky and the distant line of hills. "It is that." Dallas glanced at her. "Different from Boston, I expect. Completely, but wonderful in its own way." She hesitated. "I thought I would miss the city more than I do. The theaters, the shops, the bustle. But there's something about this openness that speaks to me." Dallas nodded, understanding in his eyes. "It gets in your blood, the space to breathe, to think." The ranch came into view as they crested a hill, a modest house with a wide porch, a large barn, several corrals, and beyond, pastures where cattle grazed peacefully. A bunkhouse stood a short distance from the main house, smoke rising from its chimney. "It's not much," Dallas said, suddenly seeming self-conscious. "But it's home." "It's lovely," Temperance replied honestly. "You've built something real here." Dallas helped her down from the wagon, his hands strong and sure at her waist. For a moment they stood close, his eyes searching hers before he stepped back and cleared his throat. "Let me show you around." The tour began with the house, a simple structure with a kitchen, a sitting room with a stone fireplace and 2 bedrooms. The furniture was plain but solid, and everything was meticulously clean. "My mother taught me that a dirty house means a lazy man," Dallas explained when Temperance commented on the tidiness. "I've got 2 ranch hands who live in the bunkhouse, but I tend to the house myself." Outside, he showed her the barn with its tack room and hay loft, the chicken coop where a dozen hens scratched and clucked, and the vegetable garden, now mostly harvested for the winter. "You do all this yourself?" Temperance asked, impressed by the orderliness of the operation. "Jim and Manuel help with the cattle and the heavy work, but yes, most of it falls to me." He hesitated. "It's a lot for one person. Always thought I'd have a wife to share it with, but..." He trailed off, looking away. "But," she prompted gently. Dallas sighed. "Never seemed to find the right woman. Or when I did, circumstances got in the way." Before Temperance could ask more, they were interrupted by the arrival of Dallas's ranch hands, returning from checking the herd. Introductions were made, and soon they all moved to the house where Dallas prepared a simple but hearty meal of beans, cornbread, and coffee. As they ate at the kitchen table, Temperance observed the easy camaraderie between Dallas and his men. They respected him, that much was clear, but there was also genuine affection in their interactions. This was a man who led by example, who worked alongside those he employed. After the meal, Jim and Manuel excused themselves to the bunkhouse, leaving Dallas and Temperance alone. They moved to the porch where they sat in rocking chairs watching the sunset paint the sky in spectacular shades of orange and pink. "Will you be happy here, Temperance?" Dallas asked suddenly. "In Willowbrook, I mean, it's not Boston." She considered the question carefully. "I think I will be. The school needs a teacher and I need to be needed. And I've made friends you, Mrs. Peterson, some of the ladies from church." "And what about family? Do you want children someday?" The question caught her off guard, but she answered truthfully. "Yes, very much so. I've always wanted a family of my own." Dallas nodded, his expression thoughtful as he gazed at the horizon. "Me too." The air between them seemed to thicken with unspoken possibilities. Temperance found herself holding her breath, waiting for something she couldn't name. Finally, Dallas turned to look at her directly. "Temperance, I'm not a man of fancy words or grand gestures, but these past months getting to know you, they've been the best of my life." Her heart quickened. "Mine too, Dallas. I don't want to rush you. I know you've been hurt, and trust doesn't come easy after that." He leaned forward, elbows on his knees. "But I want you to know that when you're ready, if you're ever ready, I'll be here." Temperance felt tears prick at her eyes. "Dallas Reed, are you courting me?" A slow smile spread across his face. "Yes, madam, I believe I am, if you'll have me." She reached across the space between them and placed her hand over his. "I would like that very much." The ride back to town was filled with a new awareness, a tentative joy that made the familiar landscape seem fresh and full of promise. Dallas helped her down from the wagon at the boarding house, his touch lingering just a moment longer than necessary. "Good night, Temperance," he said softly. "Good night, Dallas." On impulse, she rose on her tiptoes and pressed a quick kiss to his cheek before hurrying inside, her heart lighter than it had been in years. November brought cooler temperatures and preparations for Thanksgiving. The school board asked Temperance to assist Miss Whitfield for the remainder of the term, allowing her to meet the children and learn the curriculum before taking over in January. She threw herself into the work, finding joy in the curious minds and earnest faces of her future pupils. Dallas continued his Saturday visits, though now they were officially courting, their outings took on a new significance. They attended church together, dined with friends, and once, daringly, went on a picnic chaperoned only by Dallas's faithful horse. It was during this picnic, seated on a blanket beneath a sprawling oak tree, that Dallas first kissed her properly. His lips were gentle against hers, his hand cupping her cheek as if she were made of porcelain. When they broke apart, his blue eyes searched hers, asking a silent question. "I'm not going to break, Dallas," she whispered. He smiled, a rare full smile that transformed his weathered face. No, I don't suppose you are. You're stronger than you look, Temperance Foster. Their courtship progressed steadily through November and into December. Dallas began making improvements to his house: new curtains for the windows, a better cookstove, a second rocking chair for the porch. The town noticed, and speculation ran rampant. He's getting ready for a wife, that's what, Mrs. Peterson declared one evening as she and Temperance washed dishes. And about time, too. Man his age needs a good woman. Temperance felt her cheeks warm. We're simply courting, Mrs. Peterson, the older woman snorted. For now, mark my words, he'll propose by Christmas. Christmas Eve arrived with a dusting of snow, rare for that part of Texas. The church was decorated with evergreen boughs and candles. The congregation gathered for the annual service and celebration. Temperance, dressed in her best green wool dress with a white lace collar, sat beside Dallas in the front pew. After the service, the town gathered in the church hall for refreshments and carols. Children ran about, high on excitement and sugar cookies, while adults clustered in groups, catching up on the latest news and gossip. Dallas seemed unusually quiet, his gaze distant. When Temperance asked if something was wrong, he squeezed her hand and murmured, "Just thinking." As the evening wound down, Dallas asked if she would walk with him before returning to the boarding house. Despite the cold, Temperance agreed, wrapping her shawl tightly around her shoulders. They strolled through the quiet town, their breath forming clouds in the frosty air. Dallas led her to the small town park, where a gazebo stood decorated with holly and ribbon for the holiday. "Are you cold?" he asked as they stepped into the shelter of the gazebo. "A little," Temperance admitted, "but it's beautiful out here." Dallas nodded, looking up at the clear sky filled with stars. "Temperance, there's something I need to say." Her heart skipped a beat. "Yes." He took both her hands in his expression serious in the moonlight. "I know we haven't been courting long, and I know you've had reason to be cautious about men and their promises." Temperance felt a flutter of anticipation in her stomach. "Dallas, please, let me finish." He took a deep breath. "I'm not Thomas or Harold. I can't offer you theaters or fancy dinners or a life of leisure. What I have is a ranch that needs work, a house that needs a woman's touch, and a heart that's been waiting for someone like you." Tears welled in Temperance's eyes as Dallas dropped to one knee in the snow-dusted gazebo. "Temperance Foster, I may not be much, but I promise you this: I will never leave you at the altar. I will never decide someone else suits me better. I will work every day to be worthy of your trust." He reached into his pocket and withdrew a small ring, a simple gold band with a modest diamond. "Let me be your first real husband. Will you marry me?" For a moment, Temperance couldn't speak, overcome by the sincerity in his voice, the love in his eyes. This was different from Thomas's practiced proposal in a Boston garden, different from Harold's flowery letter. This was real, a man offering his heart without pretense or hidden motives. "Yes," she whispered, then louder. "Yes, Dallas Reed, I will marry you." His face broke into that rare, transformative smile as he slipped the ring onto her finger. It fit perfectly. He rose and gathered her into his arms, his kiss deep and promising, warming her despite the December chill. When they finally broke apart, Dallas rested his forehead against hers. "I was thinking we could marry after New Year's. Give us time to prepare, unless you want to wait longer." Temperance shook her head. "No, New Year's sounds perfect. A new beginning." They walked back to the boarding house hand in hand, stopping occasionally to share kisses that grew more heated each time. At the doorstep, Dallas held her close, his voice rough with emotion. "I love you, Temperance. Have for a while now." She touched his cheek, marveling at how this man, this steady, honorable cowboy, had mended what she thought was irreparably broken. "I love you too, Dallas, with all my heart." News of their engagement spread through Willowbrook like wildfire. To Temperance's surprise, the reaction was overwhelmingly positive. The town had watched their courtship with approval, many noting that Dallas Reed had finally found a woman worthy of his steadfast nature. The wedding was set for January 2, 1879, a simple ceremony in the church followed by a reception at the hotel. Miss Whitfield, now Mrs. Reynolds after her own December wedding, insisted on helping with the preparations, as did Mrs. Peterson and several ladies from the church. On New Year's Day, the day before the wedding, Temperance sat in her room at the boarding house. her wedding dress a new one, made of cream-colored silk with lace at the collar and cuffs hanging on the wardrobe door. The dress she had brought for her wedding to Harold remained in her trunk, a reminder of a path not taken. A knock at the door interrupted her thoughts. Mrs. Peterson entered, carrying a small package. "This came for you on the afternoon stage," she said, handing over the parcel. From Boston, by the look of it. Temperance recognized her mother's handwriting on the wrapping. Inside was a small velvet box containing a pearl necklace and a note. "For your wedding day, may this third time be the one that lasts. All our love, Mother and Father." Tears filled Temperance's eyes. Her parents had been unable to make the journey for the wedding, but they had sent their blessing in this tangible form. "They're beautiful," Mrs. Peterson said, admiring the pearls. "Will you wear them tomorrow?" "Yes," Temperance replied, touching the smooth orbs. A piece of home to begin my new life. The wedding day dawned clear and cold. Temperance woke early, her stomach fluttering with nerves and excitement. This was her third wedding day, but it felt entirely different from the previous two. There was no doubt in her mind, no fear that Dallas would fail to appear at the altar. Mrs. Peterson and several other ladies helped her dress and arrange her hair. The cream silk dress fit perfectly, the pearl necklace gleaming at her throat. Her borrowed veil from the doctor's wife was secured with a comb adorned with blue forget-me-nots, fulfilling the old tradition of something old, new, borrowed, and blue. "You look radiant," Mrs. Peterson declared, her usual gruffness softened by emotion. "Dallas Reed is a lucky man." "I'm the lucky one," Temperance replied, smoothing her skirts. The church was filled to capacity when Temperance arrived. With no father present to give her away, the town's mayor had volunteered for the honor. As the piano struck up the wedding march, Temperance took a deep breath and began her walk down the aisle. Dallas stood at the altar, dressed in a new black suit, his hair neatly combed, his face freshly shaved. But it was his expression that caught at Temperance's heart: wonder, joy, and love so clear that she felt it like a physical touch. The ceremony was brief but meaningful. They exchanged traditional vows, Dallas's voice steady and sure, Temperance's clear despite the tears that threatened. When the minister pronounced them husband and wife, Dallas's kiss was gentle but possessive, a promise of things to come. The reception at the hotel was a joyous affair, with music, dancing, and more food than Temperance had seen in one place since leaving Boston. Dallas kept her close, his hand at the small of her back, his eyes rarely leaving her face. "Happy Mrs. Reed?" he asked as they shared a quiet moment between dances. "Immensely, Mr. Reed." She leaned into him, savoring the solid warmth of his body. "I can scarcely believe this is real." "Believe it." He brushed a kiss against her temple. "You're stuck with me now." As the celebration continued around them, Temperance reflected on the strange path that had led her here. 2 broken engagements, a journey west, a chance encounter with a cowboy on a dusty street, all leading to this moment, this man, this new life opening before her. When it came time to leave, Dallas helped her into the wagon that would take them to the ranch, their home now. The town gathered to see them off, throwing rice and calling good wishes. As they drove away, Dallas covered her hand with his. "No regrets?" he asked, a rare moment of uncertainty in his voice. Temperance smiled up at him, her heart full. "Not a single one." The ranch house welcomed them with warmth, Dallas having asked Jim and Manuel to light the fires before departing for their own celebrations in town. Temperance entered as a bride for the third time, but as a wife for the first. Dallas carried her over the threshold, setting her down gently in the sitting room that now boasted new curtains she had sewn herself, and a colorful quilt across the back of the sofa, a wedding gift from the church ladies. "Welcome home, Temperance Reed," he said softly. "Home," she repeated, the word filled with new meaning. "I like the sound of that." Their first night as husband and wife was a revelation. Dallas was as gentle in the bedroom as he was strong in the fields, his hands reverent as they undressed her, his kisses deepening from tender to passionate. He guided her through the initial discomfort with patience and care, and by the time they lay tangled in the sheets, breathless and sated, Temperance knew that this marriage was what she had been waiting for all along. I never thought I could feel like this, she whispered against his chest, listening to the steady beat of his heart. Dallas's arms tightened around her. Like what? Complete, safe, loved. He kissed the top of her head. Get used to it, Mrs. Reed. You'll be feeling that way for a long, long time. The first months of marriage brought adjustments for both of them. Dallas learned to share his space and his decisions, while Temperance adapted to life on a working ranch. She rose before dawn to prepare breakfast, managed the household accounts, and even learned to gather eggs without being pecked by the territorial hens. The teaching position provided its own challenges and rewards. The children of Willowbrook ranged from eager learners to reluctant scholars, but Temperance approached each with the same patience and determination. By spring, even the most recalcitrant students had warmed to their new teacher. Dallas expanded his operation, adding 20 acres and beginning to breed horses as well as cattle. The extra work meant long days and sometimes nights when he was too tired for more than a quick kiss before falling asleep. But there were also evenings spent on the porch watching the sunset, Sundays devoted to leisure and each other, and stolen moments of passion that left them both breathless and wanting more. Their first major disagreement came in June, when Temperance's parents wrote announcing their intention to visit in July. Dallas, in the middle of a difficult calving season and negotiations for a major cattle sale, was less than enthusiastic about hosting his in-laws. They're from Boston, Temperance. They'll hate it here. The heat, the dust, the lack of, whatever it is city folks need. They're my parents, Dallas. They want to see where I live, meet my husband, know that I'm happy. And you can't tell them that in a letter. The argument escalated, voices raised in a way they hadn't been before. Temperance stormed out to the garden, Dallas to the barn. They went to bed that night without resolving the issue, backs turned to each other in the darkness. Morning brought contrition. Dallas found Temperance in the kitchen, her eyes red from crying, and gathered her into his arms. I'm sorry, he murmured against her hair. Of course your parents should visit, we'll make it work. She clung to him, relief washing through her. I was afraid you'd changed your mind about me. About us? Dallas pulled back to look at her, his expression serious. One fight doesn't change what we have, Temperance. I promised to be your real husband, remember? That means working through the hard times, not walking away when things get tough. The visit from her parents went better than either of them had anticipated. Mr. and Mrs. Foster, while initially taken aback by the rustic conditions, were won over by Dallas's obvious devotion to their daughter and by Temperance's evident happiness. You've built a good life here, Mr. Foster told Dallas as they sat on the porch one evening watching the sunset. Different from what we imagined for Temperance, but good. Thank you, sir. I aim to make her happy every day. I can see that you do. The older man nodded approvingly. Those other fellows, they weren't worthy of her. You are. The summer passed in a blur of work and heat. The cattle sale went through, providing a welcome influx of cash that Dallas invested partly in improvements to the ranch and partly in a surprise for Temperance, a piano for the sitting room, delivered all the way from San Antonio. Dallas, she exclaimed when the deliveryman finished setting it up. How did you manage this? He shrugged, pleased by her reaction. Had some extra from the sale. Thought you might like to play again, like you told me you did in Boston. Temperance ran her fingers over the keys, tears welling in her eyes. This must have cost a fortune to ship. You're worth it. He pulled her to her feet and into his arms. Besides, now our children will have music in their home. The mention of children had become more frequent in their conversations. By fall, Temperance had begun to worry that something might be wrong. Many of her married friends in town were already expecting or had given birth, while she remained childless after nearly 9 months of marriage. Give it time, Mrs. Peterson advised when Temperance confided her concerns. Some things can't be rushed. In November, as their first anniversary approached, Temperance finally had news to share. She waited until Dallas returned from a long day checking fences, preparing his favorite meal and wearing the blue dress he particularly admired. What's the occasion? He asked, kissing her cheek before washing up for dinner. Do I need an occasion to cook my husband a special meal? Dallas raised an eyebrow, clearly suspicious but willing to play along. They ate by candlelight, discussing the day's events and plans for winter. When they had finished, Temperance took a deep breath. "Dallas, I have something to tell you." He reached for her hand across the table. "I'm listening." "I visited Dr. Mitchell today." She paused, savoring the moment. "We're going to have a baby in May." Dallas's expression transformed from concern to shock to joy in the span of seconds. He was out of his chair and around the table in an instant, pulling Temperance to her feet and into a fierce embrace. "A baby," he whispered against her hair. "Our baby. Are you happy?" He laughed, the sound rich and full. "Happy doesn't begin to cover it, Temperance. There aren't words." He dropped to his knees suddenly, placing his hands reverently on her still flat stomach. "Hello in there, little one. Your papa can't wait to meet you." The tenderness of the gesture brought tears to Temperance's eyes. This was the man she had married, strong enough to build a ranch from nothing, gentle enough to speak to their unborn child with such love. Winter brought heavy snowfall, unusual for that part of Texas. Dallas worked tirelessly to ensure the cattle had access to feed and water, often returning to the house exhausted and chilled to the bone. Temperance worried about him pushing himself too hard, especially as reports came in of ranchers losing stock to the harsh conditions. "You can't keep this up," she insisted one night after he'd come in past midnight, his hands raw from breaking ice on the water troughs. "Let Jim and Manuel take more shifts. That's why you have them." "They're doing all they can," Dallas replied, too tired to argue. "This is the worst winter in 20 years, according to old Pete at the general store." "Then hire more help. We can afford it now." Dallas looked at her, a small smile tugging at his lips despite his fatigue. "When did you get so bossy, Mrs. Reed?" "When my husband started working himself to death while I'm carrying his child." She softened her tone, taking his hands in hers. "Please, Dallas, I need you healthy and whole." He relented, hiring 2 additional hands for the duration of the winter. The decision proved wise when February brought another blizzard that kept them housebound for 3 days. By March, the worst had passed, and the first signs of spring began to appear across the ranch. As Temperance's pregnancy progressed, Dallas became increasingly protective, insisting she reduce her teaching hours and rest more. She complied to a point, knowing her health and the babies were paramount, but maintained enough independence to keep from feeling smothered. The baby's room was prepared with care. A crib Dallas built himself. A rocking chair moved from the sitting room. Curtains Temperance sewed from soft yellow fabric. They debated names endlessly, unable to agree on either a boy's or girl's name until finally settling on Daniel for a boy, after Dallas's father, and Tabitha for a girl, after Temperance's grandmother. May arrived with sunshine and wildflowers blanketing the fields around the ranch. Temperance, now heavy with child, found movement increasingly difficult but refused to be confined to bed as Dr. Mitchell suggested. "I'll rest when the baby comes," she told Dallas firmly. "Until then, I need to finish preparing." Her determination was tested when labor began 2 weeks earlier than expected. It started as a dull ache in her back one morning as she was gathering eggs, progressing to unmistakable contractions by afternoon. Dallas, alerted by one of the ranch hands, came running from the far pasture to find Temperance calmly instructing Manuel's wife, Maria, who had experience as a midwife, on what to fetch from the linen closet. "The baby's coming," she told Dallas, wincing as another contraction gripped her. "Doctor." "Mitchell won't make it in time. Maria will help." Dallas's face paled. "But it's too early. You need the doctor." "Babies come when they're ready, not when it's convenient," Maria said matter-of-factly. "This one is ready. Now go boil water and stay out of the way." For the next 12 hours, Dallas alternated between pacing outside the bedroom door and sitting beside Temperance, holding her hand through contractions that left her gasping and drenched in sweat. As dawn broke, Maria announced that it was time to push. "I can't," Temperance whispered, exhaustion evident in every line of her body. "I'm too tired." "Yes, you can," Dallas said firmly, supporting her back. "You're the strongest person I know, Temperance Reed. Our baby needs you to be strong just a little longer." Drawing on reserves she didn't know she possessed, Temperance pushed with the next contraction, and the next, and the next. And then, suddenly, A new sound filled the room, the indignant cry of a newborn taking their first breath. "A girl," Maria announced, quickly wrapping the infant in a clean blanket. "A beautiful girl." She placed the tiny bundle in Temperance's arms. Dallas leaned close, his face awestruck as he gazed at their daughter, red-faced, squalling, perfect. "Tabitha," Temperance murmured, counting tiny fingers and toes. "Our Tabitha." Dallas brushed a finger gently over the baby's cheek, his eyes suspiciously bright. "She's magnificent, like her mother." The days and weeks that followed were a blur of feedings, diaper changes, and stolen moments of sleep. Dallas proved to be a natural father, walking the floor with Tabitha when she was fussy, changing her without complaint, watching in wonder as she grew and changed each day. "I never knew I could love someone so much," he confessed one night as they stood over her crib watching her sleep. "Except you, of course." Temperance leaned against him, savoring his solid warmth. "It's different, isn't it, this love? It's overwhelming, in the best way." He wrapped an arm around her waist. "Thank you for giving me this family, Temperance, for trusting me to be your husband, her father." "Thank you for being the man worth trusting," she replied, turning in his arms to face him. "My first real husband, my only husband." Dallas's kiss was tender, a promise renewed. "Forever, Mrs. Reed, that's how long you're stuck with me." "Forever sounds just about right," Temperance whispered against his lips, her heart full to bursting with the love she had found in this unexpected place, with this steadfast man who had seen her worth when others had not. As they stood together in the soft lamplight, their daughter sleeping peacefully beside them, Temperance knew with absolute certainty that sometimes the longest journeys led exactly where you were meant to be all along. Summer turned to fall, and fall to winter, and winter to spring again. The ranch prospered under Dallas's careful management, the horse breeding program particularly successful. Temperance returned to teaching part-time, bringing Tabitha with her in a basket that sat beside her desk. The arrangement raised eyebrows at first, but the school board relented when they saw how the children adored their teacher's baby, and how Temperance managed both responsibilities with grace. Tabitha grew from a newborn to an infant to a toddler, her personality emerging stubborn like her father, thoughtful like her mother, and with a laugh that could light up the darkest day. She took her first steps in the garden, chasing a butterfly under Temperance's watchful eye, and spoke her first word, "Dada," during Sunday dinner, causing Dallas to nearly choke on his roast beef with pride. On Tabitha's second birthday, as they celebrated with a small party at the ranch, Dallas pulled Temperance aside, his expression unusually serious. "I've been thinking," he began, taking her hands in his. "It's time we gave Tabitha a brother or sister, if you're ready." Temperance smiled, squeezing his hands. "I've been thinking the same thing." Their second child, Daniel, arrived with considerably less drama than his sister, born on a clear September morning in 1882 with Dr. Mitchell in attendance. Where Tabitha was fair like her mother, Daniel had Dallas's darker coloring and solemn expression. "He looks like he's already figuring out how to run the ranch," Dallas joked as he held his son for the first time. "God help us if he has your stubbornness," Temperance replied, watching them with a mother's pride. Life settled into a rhythm of work and family, challenges and joys. The ranch expanded again, now encompassing 100 acres with 500 head of cattle and a growing reputation for fine quarter horses. Dallas hired more hands, built a larger bunkhouse, and finally gave in to Temperance's suggestion that they add a dedicated schoolroom to the main house, where she could teach Tabitha and eventually Daniel before they were old enough to attend the town school. In the summer of 1885, as they celebrated their 6th anniversary with a rare night away at the hotel in town, Dallas surprised Temperance with a gift the deed to a small house on the edge of Willowbrook. "What's this for?" she asked, puzzled. "For the future," he explained. "When we're older and the children are grown, if we want to be closer to town. Or for them, if they choose to stay in Willowbrook." Temperance was touched by his foresight, his constant planning for their family's security and happiness. "You think of everything, don't you?" He shrugged, that familiar hint of shyness still present after years of marriage. "I just want to take care of what matters. You, the children, our life together. You do, she assured him, kissing him deeply. More than I ever dreamed possible. That night, as they made love in the hotel room, away from the responsibilities of the ranch and the constant vigilance required with young children, Temperance reflected on the journey that had brought her to this man, this life. The pain of her previous heartbreaks had faded to distant memory, overshadowed by the reality of Dallas's steady love and their growing family. 3 months later, she discovered she was expecting their third child. This pregnancy was harder than the previous two, with persistent sickness and fatigue that lasted well into the second trimester. Dallas worried constantly, taking on more household duties and insisting she rest whenever possible. "I'm pregnant, not invalid," she protested one afternoon when he found her weeding the garden. "Humor me," he replied, gently but firmly taking the trowel from her hands. "You've been pushing yourself too hard." She relented, recognizing the love behind his concern. "Very well. But only for an hour, then I need to start dinner." "Manuel's wife is handling dinner tonight, doctor's orders." Temperance raised an eyebrow. "You spoke to Dr. Mitchell about me." "I did," Dallas said unapologetically, "and he agrees you need more rest." "Traitor," she muttered, but allowed him to help her to the porch where a comfortable chair and a glass of lemonade awaited. The baby, a girl they named Sarah after Dallas's mother, arrived in the spring of 1886. She was smaller than her siblings had been, with a delicate frame and wise eyes that seemed to take in everything. "She's going to be the smart one," Dallas predicted as he cradled her. "Look at how she watches everything." "They're all smart," Temperance corrected him, "just in different ways." As the children grew, their distinct personalities became even more apparent. Tabitha was adventurous and outgoing, always ready to try new things and make new friends. Daniel was quieter, more deliberate, with a natural affinity for animals and the workings of the ranch. Sarah, true to Dallas's prediction, showed an early love of books and learning, sitting for hours as Temperance read to her. The years passed in a blend of ordinary days and milestone moments: first days of school, holidays, cattle drives, summer storms, winter fires in the hearth. The ranch prospered, allowing Dallas to add modern conveniences to the house: a pump in the kitchen, a proper bathroom with running water, even a telephone line in 1890. What will they think of next? Temperance marveled as they placed their first call to the general store in town. "Flying machines, if you believe the newspapers," Dallas replied with a grin. "Though I'll stick to horses, thank you very much." Their marriage deepened with time, evolving from the passionate romance of their early years to a partnership built on mutual respect, shared goals, and an abiding love that weathered the inevitable storms of life together. They argued occasionally. Dallas was still stubborn, Temperance still independent, but never went to bed angry, a rule they had established in that first difficult year. In 1893, as they celebrated their 15th anniversary, Dallas surprised Temperance with a trip to San Antonio, their first real vacation since the children were born. Tabitha, now 14 and responsible beyond her years, was left in charge of her siblings with Jim's wife nearby to help if needed. "Are you sure they'll be all right?" Temperance fretted as they boarded the train. "They'll be fine," Dallas assured her. "Tabitha could probably run the ranch better than I can at this point." The week away was a revelation: sleeping late, dining in restaurants, attending the theater, and rediscovering each other away from the demands of ranch life and parenthood. On their last night, as they walked along the San Antonio River, Dallas stopped suddenly and turned to face her. "Happy?" he asked, a callback to their wedding day. Temperance smiled up at him, noting the silver now threading through his dark hair, the deeper lines around his eyes that crinkled when he smiled. He was still handsome to her, still the man who had rescued her on a dusty street all those years ago. "Immensely," she replied, echoing her answer from that day. "You've given me everything I ever wanted, Dallas: a home, a family, a life with purpose." He drew her close, his arms as strong as ever. "You gave me the same, Temperance. Plus, you taught me how to dance and use the right fork at dinner." She laughed, resting her head against his chest. "Such valuable skills for a rancher. You'd be surprised. That fancy dinner with the cattle buyers from Chicago, Your lessons saved the deal." They stood in comfortable silence for a moment, watching the moonlight play on the water. "We've done all right, haven't we?" Dallas said finally. "For a jilted bride and a lonesome cowboy. More than all right," Temperance replied, lifting her face for his kiss. "We've built something real, something that will last." As they returned home to the ranch, to Tabitha's excited recounting of the week's events, to Daniel's proud demonstration of how he'd fixed the broken gate all by himself, to Sarah's stack of drawings depicting everything they had missed, Temperance felt a profound gratitude for the twists of fate that had brought her to this life. Thomas and Harold, those men who had once broken her heart, had inadvertently set her on the path to true happiness. Had either of them followed through on their promises, she would never have come to Willowbrook, never have met Dallas Reed, never have known what it meant to be truly loved for exactly who she was. As she unpacked their bags that night, Temperance found a small package tucked among her things, a leather-bound journal with her initials embossed on the cover, and a note in Dallas's distinctive handwriting. "For the next chapter of our story, all my love, D." She traced the letters with her fingertip, smiling at his thoughtfulness. Their story was still being written, page by page, day by day, and she couldn't wait to see what the next chapters would bring. The future stretched before them, as wide and promising as the Texas sky, their children growing, the ranch thriving, their love deepening with each passing year. Whatever challenges came, they would face them together, just as they had since that fateful evening when a cowboy had taken in a twice jilted bride and offered to be her first real husband. And he had been her first, her last, her only. The husband who had kept his promises, who had loved her through good times and bad, who had built with her a life more beautiful than anything she could have imagined when she stepped off that train so many years before. As Dallas joined her in their bedroom, wrapping his arms around her from behind and pressing a kiss to her neck, Temperance closed her eyes and savored the moment, this ordinary, extraordinary moment in a life filled with them. "Welcome home, Mrs. Reed," he murmured against her skin, the same words he had spoken on their wedding night. "Home," she replied, turning in his arms to face him, the best word in the English language. His smile, still capable of making her heart skip after all these years, was tender as he brushed a strand of hair from her face. "I love you, Temperance, more today than yesterday. And I love you, Dallas Reed, today, tomorrow, always." As they stood together in the room that had witnessed their beginnings as husband and wife, their whispered promises, their darkest fears and brightest hopes, Temperance knew with absolute certainty that she had found what every heart seeks: a love that endures, a home that welcomes, and a life rich with purpose and meaning. She had come west seeking a husband and found instead a partner, a best friend, a lover, a co-creator of a life beyond her wildest dreams. And in the end, that was worth every tear shed, every disappointment weathered, every mile traveled to reach this place, this man, this love that would last a lifetime and beyond.